everyone, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of Gothic Horror Mashups, and welcome to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about some summer reads. I realized we're at the end of July, summer's almost over, but I just had other plans for videos and then I got sick and had a vacation, and so last week I didn't even have a video come out, so I apologize for that. And so here we are, the summer recs have to come at the end of July. That's just how the cookie crumbled this time. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So I have a lot of books to talk about, so I'm not going to give a synopsis for all of these books. If you see a book that looks interesting to you, then you can go ahead and pause the video and look it up yourself or look it up later. Let's get into the books. So when I think about summer reads, I think about sun and beaches and water and vacations and all of that stuff, which I'm sure all of you feel the same. So I have some books that have to do with vacations and being on the water. So first we have Where the Crawdads Sing. This doesn't actually take place in summer, but it has a lot to do with like a marsh and water, and so I always think of this as a summertime read. And then we have Paradise Club. This one is a horror novel about these people that purposely get trapped on this island with no technology and, chaos ensues. So this is more of a slasher. And then I have a middle grade book called The Undrowned. So because it's about a little child that gets drowned in a lake, it just seems summery, so this is also horror. And then this is horror light. It's supposed to be more comedic than horror, but it's horror adjacent. So we have Nightmare of a Trip, about a family that goes on vacation during the summer. They're doing the whole American road trip type thing, but spooky things start to happen and they're trying to figure out what's seemingly following them and trying to salvage their family fun time, and hopefully they want to draw closer to their teenagers and form those bonds with their family while also dealing with these haunted things that are following them around. And then we have This Delicious Death. This is a YA novel, and this one is not technically a zombie book, but it reads like a zombie book, but I think they're actually ghouls or something. But we have this group of friends that are going out into the desert to go to this music festival, and then there's I guess you could call it a pandemic, where certain people, they get this contagion and they turn into these ghouls, and so they have to carry around meat that they could eat. It's like human meat, but it's synthetic so that they don't actually have to eat real people. And then we have The Villa, and this one has to do with reality TV, so if you like that type of thing, this is summary. And then we have One of the Girls, and this takes place on an island and is like a girls' trip away from home. And then yet another book that takes place on an island, we have Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins, and this is about these girls that go on this trip and they get stranded on this island with these other people that, seem fun at first, but then kind of seem strange and suspicious towards the end, and they're not sure they want to be trapped with them anymore. And then we have another book called The Villa by that same author, and this is about two friends that go off to this villa to spend some time away from everything so that they can write, because they're both authors, and I love books about authors. And then we have a couple of more books that take place, I think, on islands, don't quote me on that, and they also have to do with reality TV shows. So again, if that's kind of your vibe, then maybe pick these up. So we have A Game of Lies, and this is the second in a series technically, but I think they're standalones, but one of the main characters might be like the same, but I think it's a different story. So I don't think you have to start at the beginning, but you might want to, so that you get the little ins and outs of the character and their backstory and stuff. And then we have One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. I'm sure you've already seen this book around. It was really buzzy when it first came out. But again, this is a reality TV show about couples that get stranded on this island and everybody leaves. And so it kind of turns into a survival story where they're trying to deal with the elements that they weren't anticipating having to deal with being on this TV show. They thought it would be, all sun and fun, but that's not what they got. And then we have Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward, and this one is a coming-of-age story about childhood summers, which always speaks to me of summerhood, when I think of it, or Malignant Summer, or, any type of friend group that's like growing up, having a coming-of-age story just always seems summery. And this one does say it takes place in the summer, like it's talking about all the summers that these friends have spent together. And obviously it has to do with water and being on the lake, so it just seems very summery. So this would be a good one to pick up. So then I have some books that actually take place on the beach. So I have some vintage horror books by R.L. Stine. So we have Beach House. This was my favorite growing up. I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was amazing. I reread it as an adult and it was kind of okay, but still very, very fun, very, very nostalgic read. And then we have a Beach Party. And then we have a couple of vampire books. So I think I should turn those around. So we got Midnight Kiss and then Midnight Kiss #2. So these are vampire books, but they're very beachy and they take place on the beach. Oh, sorry, not Midnight Kiss, Goodnight Kiss. I read that wrong. Good Night Kiss. And then we have a super chiller called High Tide. And then we have The Dead Lifeguard. We also have a Goosebumps book, which is called Ghost Beach. And then speaking of lifeguards, we have a YA novel called The Counselors. This is like a murder mystery book. And then another YA book is Liar's Beach. And then another YA book that takes place near the water and during the summertime is Kill Creatures. This is the newest release by Rory Powers. It just came out like a month or 2 ago. So this is about a group of friends that last summer, a bunch of their friends ended up dying, but then one of them returned. And the last survivor was like, but you're supposed to be dead. And then I also have some books that actually take place on boats. So either like speedboats or cruises or, sailboats or different things like that. So we have The Stowaway. This is a thriller. And I believe this is a serial killer that's on board this cruise ship. So I haven't read this one yet, but I hear fantastic things about it. And then we have The Woman in Cabin 10. And this one is actually cold because the ocean that she's in isn't warm and sunny. It's like by Iceland or something. So it's technically a colder book, but because it takes place on the water and on a boat, I just figured it seems kind of summery. And then we have a YA horror novel called Cursed Cruise. This is about a ghost ship or like a haunting on a ship. We have a couple of YA murder mysteries. We have Lying in the Deep and then Seasick. And then an adult horror novel called The Deep. So this one's not really a vacation like on a cruise ship. This is actually about the Titanic. But again, it's on the ocean. It's a ship, so you could consider it a summery read. So this is basically if the Titanic and the Britannic, which is another ship that was sunk, if they were haunted. And then when I think of summer, I also think of like theme parks and things. And so I have another few books by R.L. Stine. We have Fear Park. So we have #1, the first Scream. And then #2, the second Scream. And then book 3, the third Scream. And then we have a Goosebumps book called Welcome to Horrorland. Oh, sorry, One Day at Horrorland. Got it wrong again. And then I had a water park slasher book by Cameron Rubik, and I meant to look up what the title of the book was because I forgot. So I'll go ahead and put it up here on the screen. And it's part of a series. There's more than one, but water parks are very summery, and a good old 80s type slasher would be fun to read in the summertime. And then speaking of water parks, we have Wretched Water Park by Kristen White, and this is part of a series called the Sinister Summer series. And so we have a water park, but then you also have Vampiric Vacation, and then you also have Camp Creepy. Which brings up a good point that when I think of the summertime, I don't just think about water and beaches. I also think about camping and being in the woods. So I have a few books to show you that has to do with camping. So the first one is called The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. I'm sure you've heard of this book, but if you haven't read it yet, it's a good one to pick up, and it's a thriller. And then I have some vintage horror books. The first one is Camp Fear by Carol Ellis. And then we have The Accident by Diane Ho. And then we have yet again another Fear Street book called The Overnight. And then we have a couple more Goosebumps books. The Curse of Camp Coldly. I love this cover. I think it's amazing. And then The Horror at Camp Jelly Jam. And then we have another middle grade book by Jeff Strand, which is called The Nightmare in the Backyard. I believe this has to do with aliens, or maybe it's more of a cosmic horror, but anyways, you have these group of kids that are camping and then something happens. And then another middle grade book called It Came from the Trees. I believe this has to do with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, if you want to call them that. And this is a Girl Scout troop that's out in the woods. And then I have a YA novel called Two Sides to Every Murder. And this is very much a love letter to 80s slashers, you know, thinking of Friday the 13th type thing. It was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. And then a couple of adult novels. We have Wilderness Reform. And then Heads Will Roll by Josh Winning. So that's it. That's all the summer reads that I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. It really helps me grow my channel. Please leave me a comment down below, even if it's just an emoji. Please subscribe if you feel so inclined. I post a video every Friday, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya!